Good afternoon and hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pivot Series. I'm John Jacobs, your host for this series and for today's workshop. This series is organized by the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance, NOVA EDA. Today's session is designed as a workshop rather than a panel discussion, which is our traditional format. And that's to allow us to dive deeper into today's discussion, leveraging technology and AI for success, career success in particular. This workshop is all about how to use emerging tools and strategies to stay competitive and confident during a career transition. With AI now playing a major role in hiring and workplace productivity, learning how to work with these tools is a must. And today's workshop will show you exactly how to get started. I'm happy to be joined today by Matt Fumento, founder of the Center for Collaborative Intelligence. Matt helps organizations responsibly integrate AI to enhance human potential. He's held senior roles at Korn Ferry and the Human Capital Institute, amongst others, and brings deep expertise in human capital, workforce transformation, and digital innovation. Quick disclaimer, I serve as an advisor to the Center for Collaborative Intelligence. I'm proud of the work that they perform because I believe the value it delivers, particularly to professionals and particularly to transitioning in one's career. So just want to make sure you all understood that. We'll be taking questions at the end of each section. You'll see that Matt's prepared his presentation into chapters or sections. And we'll take questions toward the end of each of those, as well as toward the back of the workshop. So finally, questions, if you could, you'll find it under the Q&A button. So when you have questions, please do not hesitate. Go ahead and load those questions in as they occur to you, and I will be moving my eyes back and forth to monitor that. Lastly, the chat is open, and it is open to everybody, so you can please interact as the community that you are. And that's about it. So Matt, why don't we get started with you? Please go ahead and start your presentation.
Great. Thanks, John. Excuse me. Make sure you can see the slides.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. So it's great to be here, John, and everyone on the call. Just a little bit of background on Center for Collaborative Intelligence. Really, the focus on collaborative intelligence, and that is the intersection of artificial and human intelligence. And so our perspective is that obviously there's a lot going on with AI. We look at AI from a human perspective, and we talk about human-centered approaches to AI. And really, it's how do we best leverage AI to help us all be successful, both individually and organizationally. And so today's session obviously is around careers and career transitions, but I think you'll see a lot of these tenets will apply more broadly than that as well. For today, we're going to cover 4 main areas. And as John said, please go ahead and ask questions, particularly throughout, but particularly at the end of each of these sections. So the first section is around the overall landscape for AI. We're all on our own journey, and I'd say the challenge with some of these presentations is that people may have not used AI at all, and some may be extensive users of AI. So we're trying to strike the right middle ground here. But fundamentally, we're looking at how is AI changing how we do work. And the second section is going to be looking at an AI toolkit, which are specific tools that you can use for job search and sort of career exploration. The third area is really looking at a little bit longer term and saying, well, how are things shifting? And so what does that mean for the impact on all of us, on our jobs and our careers? And we have this term AI adjacent career, which is sort of basically looking at the career paths that we've traditionally known, and then how are those shifting based on AI. And then finally, we'll end up with actionable steps, the things that you can walk away with and start implementing immediately. So we'll start with the AI landscape. And so John and I, we talked about, this session and focusing on these different areas. And John will be a bit of a proxy for the audience, I think, right, John, to,
Sure.
sort of voice some of your perspectives as well. Fundamentally, the starting point is that the AI is here, and that a lot of the functionality and capability, as while it continues to evolve, it has significant impact today. And the challenge is that a lot of people aren't aware of that. And so that's a big part of what we do at CCI is to help to drive awareness. And we think that's so important because AI, well, obviously we've all heard the expression knowledge is power. I think most of us believe that. And in today's world, AI is a representative of that in exponential terms. And so AI allows us to, we use the term amplify our abilities. And so the more that we help at CCI to help you and organizations, the more that we're helping to empower you to be successful in your future. And so our mission is really to demystify AI. There's a lot of hype, a lot in the news, obviously, around AI and is it effective? Is it not effective? We believe that it's important for all of us to look at a journey from, we use the terms AI literacy to AI fluency. And you can see the definitions we have here, but basically AI literacy is a understanding of what AI is and what it can do. And then AI fluency is when you have the ability to use AI in ongoing work and ongoing real situations that you care about to make a real difference for yourself and for your organizations.
Matt, one of the questions I imagine folks are thinking about when we hear about AI, a lot of things we've heard about AI replacing people in jobs. And to what extent do you embrace AI? Do you not? Do you repel from AI? Is it really going to take your job? What's your quick thinking on that?
I mean, these are all really important questions. I can tell you that the studies say, almost all the studies that I've read say that there'll be more jobs created than lost from AI. With that said, there's also, a lot of the studies are saying that, at least half of the jobs are going to have a 20 to 30% impact on their jobs because of AI. So you may not lose a job, but your job is going to be shifting regardless, right? And so it's important
Mhm.
to understand that and to be able to make that shift as your job is being impacted by AI.
Right.
And I would also say that, and I think all of us know this, right? That anytime there's a great technological innovation, and we can go back to the Industrial Revolution and the impact of the Industrial Revolution on jobs and so forth, right? There is going to be a negative impact on the workforce, right? But the opportunity, I think, is to make that pivot. And with the right skills and with the right understanding, people can be actually much, much more successful. I think most of us would not go back to the industrial age. But with that said, what we want to do is to mitigate sort of that pain that helps to people to go from sort of where they are to where we're going to be in the future.
Great. Thanks.
Um, and so obviously this all, I think, impacts everyone on this call, that when we're talking about specifically around looking at AI to support your job search and your career changes. Well, first of all, you probably already know this, but almost 100% of organizations are using AI today in the recruitment processes. And it makes sense because AI is used for repetitive tasks. It's used to go through significant volume. And so you're seeing that the applicant tracking systems and talent management systems that recruiters are using have AI and significantly assist recruiters in going through the pipeline of opportunities. And what that means is that you need to understand that because you understand how that impacts the application process and also how you can use AI that basically works with their AI to get to this new way of recruitment. The other point here, which I think is really encouraging, is that you can see that the AI-related job postings in Virginia have increased by 42% over the last 3 years or so. And so while obviously there's been a significant economic impact, there continues to be these growing need and opportunities that are available as long as we can make the pivot to be attractive to these new emerging AI job postings.
And for the audience, Deborah Page, last week's episode, executive recruiter with McCormick Group, made this point that she identified several fields of work, and AI was aerospace, some of them, but AI she certainly called out for Virginia.
So when we talk about AI, and AI again is it's a very very broad field. So we're going to focus primarily around generative AI because that's been the big sort of boom since it was October 2022, and so in that time, people started to the like OpenAI came out with their Chat GPT, soon followed by some of the other providers that you see here. So Google created Gemini, Anthropic with Claude. Microsoft, if you're a Microsoft shop, you're using Copilot as an aid, which is powered by OpenAI. So for some of you, these are familiar terms. For some of you, this is probably new terminology for you. These are all large language models, or all LLMs. And basically, a large language model is, I've heard it described in many different ways, but maybe at the highest way is it's a prediction machine. And so it's a very sophisticated prediction machine, but it's trained on data, and depending on the data that it's trained on and the level of training and so forth, it's able to basically help us to bring and to manage intelligence in a very fast, targeted way. Now, there are downsides to that, right? We could talk about some of those downsides and some of the challenges. What I will say is that, and there's a lot of measurements around the effectiveness of these large language models. And what's really interesting to see is that they're rapidly increasing both in power and also in accuracy and in applications as well. So it's a very fast moving field. And even some of the things that we were seeing, as significant problems like 6 months ago, are now being alleviated in these latest iterations of these large language models.
And Matt, so I mean, I see these competing in the media with each other all the time. These LLMs, these platforms.
Mm.
How does the audience know like one is better than the other, and for which usage or which application? Is there a known value statement to each of these?
It's a great question, John. It's available. I'll say that it's available if you are looking for it and you know where to look for it. Um, Most people don't. And what I would also say is that it evolves so quickly that typically what we'll see is like OpenAI will come out with their new model, and then and it's really sort of raises the bar on some of the key functionality of large language models. And then Google will come out with the next iteration of Gemini, and that will catch up and surpass. And then Anthropic will come out with their next version of Claude. So they're all, a lot of these they're kind of going like this, increasing their power and their functionality. To be a little bit more specific, there are within each of these, for example, there are models that you can choose. So within all of these platforms, they have a model. I think all of them. I know certainly within Anthropic and ChatGPT, they have a focus on coding. So if you're a developer, right, then if you're a developer, you would use the model that's designed specifically for coding. They also have reasoning models. So reasoning means it's just a different way of processing and linking the content and the information. So a large part of it is just understanding your use case and then what the specific model helps to support. With all that said, what I'd say is that most people, I mean, the great majority, like 90% plus, they stick with one provider and with one model, and they don't really deviate from that. And for most use cases, and so if you look at the use cases that we have here in these bullets, these are the most common, I'd say the most common uses for generative AI LLMs today. And so, and many of us, if you're using an LLM, you've probably used it for a lot of these purposes. So content creation, right? So if you're creating, well, you're creating a resume or creating a cover letter, or creating, any of a workshop or slides or materials, right? So AI can be great for that, and it can help you to customize it. It can help you to refine it. John, as you know, with this presentation, I created an agent to help us build this presentation as an example. You can use it for business intelligence. And so when you have a lot of data, you can upload your data and have the AI run the analysis for you, which is, is a tremendous
So just
benefit.
for the baseline, so because the audience, some of you are, as Matt mentioned, are further along, and perhaps others, this is all new information. But these LLM services are paid services. There are free model versions, right, Matt, of these. But to get the more enhanced features, you're paying for a monthly subscription to an LLM, correct?
It's correct. However, what I would say is particularly for newer users, right? For newer users, their sort of free out of the box functionality and limits are sufficient to really get going. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that one, it's really easy to use these tools. And that's one reason why they've been tremendously successful is because you go into a chat box and you chat a prompt with any word you want to and you get a response. It's that easy. Now it can be more complicated and there are ways to fine tune it, but really to get started and to get value from it, you don't need to know anything other than just typing in and getting a response from that. And all that's available for free. Now, when you have to pay the pay model, typically it's around limits. So if you're on a free version, you might run into a wall that says you can't use it until the next morning because you've used up all of your, they call them tokens, which is basically your usage for a period of time. So
Mhm.
primarily it's around your usage. And so if you run out of it, you may want to pay for it. And then there's also some additional functionality that as you start to get more and more involved in using AI, you might care about. But I just, like, for example, I just unsubscribed from my professional version of OpenAI. And also for Gemini as well. Now I'm going to be retooling all this, but I'm able to operate quite fine on the free versions myself.
Gotcha. Great.
Let me keep going here.
And again, folks, if you have questions, just throw them in, comments as well. And I would also say this to the audience. If you feel as if we're being a bit basic, let us know.
Yeah.
We can amp up the conversation. But I know it's a diverse group. So go ahead, Matt.
Well, and this will amp it up a little bit, John. So the previous slide was really focused on these large language models and these sort of most common use cases that kind of everyone's starting to do. Then where we're starting to see things headed is that world is kind of ad hoc to some degree, right? Which is also why it's become so popular and adopted so quickly because it's so easy to use. Well, now what we're seeing is it's less, I mean, it's still ad hoc, but we're starting to see structure around it. And we're starting to see the AI embedded in workflows and workflow design. And so we use the term intelligent workflows for that. And so basically, and a workflow is, at the end of the day, it's any process that leads to an outcome, right? So all of our jobs consist of these workflows. And so now what we're seeing is that organizations and individuals are starting to understand where in a workflow they can take different steps and use AI in that and do it on a consistent, repeatable way. So the redesign work column, the first column to the left here, is really that. And that's what we've been saying in the last 18 months or so is, and you can see these productivity impacts of that, right? So making workers more efficient, redesigning some of the steps in the workflow itself that AI can do faster and easier and sometimes better than humans, right? The right-hand side is where things are going, and so the audience may have heard of, and some of you I'm sure have, of agents as an example. So I think Gartner at the end of last year said that AI agents were going to be the #1 topic for CIOs and for business leaders in 2025. And so you're really seeing this spike of an increase of agents. Basically, an agent, think of an agent as a sophisticated large language model that has different capabilities programmed into it. And what that allows an agent to do is it starts to take on tasks, and it starts to operate. You could give it a personality, and you could say, "I want you to play this role and think this way and take these actions on my behalf." And so, as you're hearing me say that, it starts to sound a little bit like a person, right? It sounds like a little bit like an assistant, and we think of them as sort of your digital assistants or your digital team. And so this is where things are headed right now and in the foreseeable future, is that we're building out more and more this capability of in some cases replacing, in some cases augmenting humans with digital workers. And you're seeing a significant increase in productivity, and the human skills will be shifting as we bring in more of these digital workers. And so the challenge and opportunity is for us to understand, how is our role shifting now that we have these digital teammates? And what am I expected to do now that I'm working with these digital teammates when I didn't have them previously?
Great.
So let's pause. I think we agreed that we would take a quick pause at the end of each of these chapters. Do you have any questions that have come through in the chat, or do you want
No,
to?
I don't see any questions in the nor in the chat. So let's keep going because I think from the I know how this story ends, folks, because I work with Matt on this. So I think there some real important juices toward the second half of this. So Matt, just keep rolling forward, and then we'll see how it
Perfect.
goes.
Okay. So the first chapter was more of sort of the landscape of AI today and where it's headed. And again, I would just say that it's important that you know that, because when we say it's where it's headed, it's kind of where it is in many places today. Now, for looking at more specifically some of your immediate needs around job search, AI, and many of you probably use it for some of these applications as well, right? But these are some of the primary applications that you can use AI to support your job search. So, obviously working with your resume and helping to write your resume, helping to clean up your resume, helping to target your resume to specific jobs. So, if you're targeting a particular industry or particular job title, and then often when you have a specific job description that you're applying to, then these are tools that allow you to compare the job description to your resume. They will rank your resume against the job description. They will, as far as like the potential fit for the job description. They will also identify keywords in the job description that are either covered or not covered in your resume. They will develop recommendations for you to incorporate those keywords into your resume. So it's a great resource to help you to, and again, you recall, we talked about AI is being used by the recruitment to screen your resume. So this is part of we need to understand how they do that, and then how AI can also be used to get through that screen by implementing these keywords. John, do you have a question?
Yeah, Matt, one question that came up is relevant to this slide as well is, are there currently AI agents that we can use? You and I talked about JobScan earlier, or Resi. Those are paid services, I'm pretty sure. I know. But there are agents within the LLMs
Yeah.
that perform the same or very similar function, are there not?
There are, and what I don't want to do is to like overly complicate things, but I think the best way to think about it is that there are companies that have created specific tools with specific applications, and that you've said that they charge for those. And then with the advent of agents and with the increasing functionality and power of agents, you can actually create your own version of that for many of these applications. And so, as you mentioned, like if you go to OpenAI's site, then there's a library of existing agents that you can see other people that have posted. And you'll see like the ones that are most popular, or they're in different categories like productivity or what have you. And so, you can pull an agent that will do a lot of this functionality, or you can also create an agent. Now, for a lot of people, that may feel daunting. What I would just say is that it really it's a matter of sort of knowledge and experience, and not technical know-how.
Another one question on this slide, folks are asking, are these services that you or agents you're identifying, are they free or not? Are there free versions of most of these?
There are free versions of most of these, and I think again the model, it's kind of this freemium model that I think
Freemium.
most of us are sort of familiar with these days. So I think for most of them, you'll get enough utility out of the free version, right? But you're always going to see that there's a usage cap. So it depends on how often you're using these. And then there may be, in some cases, additional functionality that you would need to pay to turn on as well. But what I would say is that they're all, what I found at least, is that I pay for some AI tools, not many. And I'm not in the job market myself today, right? Although I was, not long ago. So there's certain tools that I pay for, but they're few and far between. And so if you find the tool that really is making a difference, it's worth the $20 a month, right? And usually these are like $20 a month tools, right? So they're not significant in cost.
Well, they add up over time. Hey,
Yeah.
to Brian, we're going to hit your question toward the end, if you don't mind, because I know where you're going on that one. And then there's a question about going into more detail. I know, Matt, just be flexible with me on this, but we're getting a question about creating your own agents versus using an existing one. I mean, I'll opine on this one. I created a an ATS agent myself, which is the applicant tracking system, because I wanted to make sure, see if my resume and cover letter, but mainly the resume, how I would score. And so I happen to use OpenAI ChatGPT, and it worked with me to ask the right questions. And then that ended up being the agent that was customized for my purposes. But Matt, I mean, we talked about maybe the ease of building an agent.
Yeah, well, and I also wanted to point out your process of asking the, the LLM for its own input in doing this, right? So one thing that, if you haven't used these devices much, you need to get a little bit into the rhythm of it, right? And John, you recall you and I first started working together with it, right? And I would say, well, how come you didn't run that by GPT, right? I mean, so we would have these conversations, right? It's a little bit like spell check, like would you send something without running it through spell check? And I bring that up just to say that a lot of these things, once you start getting the habit of using them, then they make sense for you and how to use them. Taking them a little bit of the mystery. So one is I always ask GPT for its perspective on what I'm doing, right? So I start with my own version of it, and then I ask GPT, how would you do this? What are the pros and cons, and what would you do differently? And I don't always take its advice, and so we do. This is where we talk about collaborative intelligence, where I actually have a dialogue with the AI around, and this presentation was a good example. I built an agent for this that was basically me, so I had it take my information, I uploaded it into this agent. Now, with an agent, I don't want to make this overly complicated, but the way I think of it is that the technology is all on a continuum. And so what we're seeing is these large language models like the OpenAIs and Geminis and what have you, they increasingly get more sophisticated and more powerful. As they do that, they incorporate more aspects of what we think of as an agent inside of them. Okay, so which means they can take action on your behalf, as an example, right? That they can take on a personality if you program it with as instructions to do that, right? It's moving. So now where the direction is going is ultimately autonomous agents. So an autonomous agent, you think of the word autonomy, but basically it's the ability to completely act on its own. It knows its role, and it doesn't need to have any sort of prompting and interaction with you. And so there's this broad range of the technology itself. And depending on who you talk to about agents, what is really an agent or what is not an agent and whether it qualifies. I'm not sure how much I care about that. I just think about the continuum of the technology.
Mhm.
And then what I would say is for creating an agent itself, it's really easy to do once you understand, right? Once you understand sort of what it is and the parameters for doing that. But and we can, we don't have time in this conversation, but, there's a series of, 8 to 10 key parameters that we look at, and then we put some definition around. And again, I use the AI to help me to create those as well. So I'm not doing it off the top of my head. And so through that, you're able to create an agent. And I'll just say this too. One of the key factors is that in the last couple of years, we've moved to more of what they're calling a low code or no code platform. And basically what that means is that lay people like us that aren't programmers, that don't know programming language, don't need to know programming language because it's so intuitive to use these platforms. So that is a real game changer. Because before you would have needed to know Python and programming in order to create these things. Now it's drag and drop. It's using AI to create scripts that you just drop in and so forth.
Great. Do you want to talk about advanced research? I thought this is kind of cool.
Yeah. So again, there's a number of different use cases for AI, and these tools, by the way, I mean, there's a couple of tools that I really enjoy highlighting to people, and I suggest that they're kind of power tools that you should play with. And again, these are you can use these for free, right? So I've never paid for the first one, and for the notebook, I've gone sort of back and forth on it because I'm a heavy user, so I need to pay for it at this point. And let me show you the first one. But basically, if we think about AI, one of the great benefits of AI is that it can take a mass of information and structure that information in a way that makes it usable and output that we can take action on. Right. At the end of the day, I mean, it does a lot more than that, but that's one of the great use cases. It can take all this unstructured information, pull it together, and create some structure around something that you care about. And so, and from a research standpoint, and there's different tools for this, there's a number of tools for this. So you may have heard of Perplexity is one that's very good research tool, and many people are using Perplexity instead of Google these days for search. And they have deep research where you can use it. And I think the free version you can use, it used to be 5, I think, within 24 hours, or you could use 5 different examples of deep research topics, within that. This particular one I want to show you, and I'm just going to pivot off if you don't mind. It's called Ithy. So let me see if I can pivot over here.
Sure.
Yeah, here we go. So Ithy, this is a newer one, or at least I discovered it, probably 6 weeks ago or so. And what I really like about this one is that it is able to work across LLMs. So you're not constrained into going to one. You're going across multiple LLMs with this. And what it does is it pulls from these multiple LLMs and integrates the research around a structure. And so I've run probably a dozen of these various type of reports with Ithy, and they follow a similar structure, right? So in this example, again, if you think about like a chat GPT, I put a prompt in here. It took me, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds, John, to think of the prompt. And when I put in the prompt, I also say, don't be limited by this prompt. Like, you know what I'm trying to do, but I want you to think extensively about this topic, right? Because here's what we're trying to achieve. And it generates a report. It's took me about 30 seconds. This is for free. You can see it's more than 46 resources that it's pulling from, and you'll see the list at the bottom. You can see the table of contents that it's got in here, for all the various things. In this case, this is, and we'll make this available, I think, John, right, to the audience as well.
Yeah, on the landing page.
But you can see the title, right? So this is how do you navigate Northern Virginia's workforce shift, a strategic AI-powered career pivot. And so then you can see the table of contents, and you can click into the table of contents. So, for example, here's emerging in-demand skills for Northern Virginia. And it talks about, and we're going to talk a little bit about this as we continue in the presentation. And then it goes through, and what you always see is in every presentation, it's got like a spider chart like this, where it's taking some of the data and it's applying it to sort of best in class. So it also always has a bar graph where it's taking the data as a comparison. It also has an embedded, it's got a mind map as well, where it's helping you to visually look at the information in an easy to digest way. It always has a grid like this for comparative purposes. It always has an embedded video, because many of us like video as a learning tool, and typically they're about 5 to 10 minutes in length on the topic. And then it always has a FAQ. And then if you want to, you can always go deeper as well with other searches that the AI recommends. So it's a you can see, hopefully the audience sees that it's a very powerful tool that's free. Let me show the references at the bottom, the back of it too. So
and again, it took you all of 20 seconds to ask the question.
Exactly, right? And you can see all the resources pulling from, right, in order to generate that from multiple LLMs. So just a super powerful tool. And I use this, I'm starting to use it almost daily, John, because I was using other tools like Perplexity. And that's the other thing I would encourage people to do is to explore, because again, many of these things are free. I pay for, very, very few things. Like I'm generating videos, I'm gonna have to pay for that as an example. But for the most part, these tools are free, and I'd encourage you just to jump in the water and start playing with them. Let me continue. I think I want to point out is Notebook LM. Let me just talk to that one for a second. Let me go to full screen. So Notebook LM is from Google, and so Google is all these different suppliers or vendors have their sort of strengths and sort of their points of emphasis. Google's is probably it's clear that they're integrated with the Google system, right? So if you're using Google applications, they work more easily with those Google applications, although it's not a requirement. And then they have Google Labs where they're always developing sort of these new tools that are cutting edge tools. One of those tools is Notebook LM. And so I highly recommend for everyone, if you haven't used Notebook LM, go to Notebook LM. It's free up to a certain usage, and the usage is pretty, it's pretty like you can create 50 notebooks without having to pay for anything. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to basically kind of create your own private LLM. So you can add all these resources that you want to, whether they're documents or YouTube videos or PowerPoints or PDFs or what have you. And then you can interact with the AI from that content base. The other part that's really interesting about this is that it generates podcasts or audio version of the content. So the first time that this is one of those tools that it kind of blows people away. And so the first time you experience it, you're kind of like, what? Because you'll hear two people, a man and a woman, that are interacting with each other about the topic. And you can give them direction of how you want them to interact, or if you don't, they've got their sort of preset ways of interacting. You can also actually interact with these two individuals. So you can stop the recording. You can say, hey, let me ask you about this. So it's a way to audibly interact with the data, with the content. Very, very. And then the other thing I'll just add is that they're coming out with a video version of this very soon as well. So soon you'll be interacting with the video version of this as well.
And I would say to the audience, I've done this, and it's mind blowing initially, right? Because I loaded in my resume into Notebook LM, and then these two individuals, AI persons, had sort of an NPR-esque discussion about me. So if you need a shot in the arm, take your resume, load it into Notebook LM, and they'll have a very uplifting conversation about you, and it'll be a good shot in the arm.
Very
So
true.
try
I
that.
did the same, John. It's a
Yeah.
it's a wild experience, isn't it? So hopefully we're encouraging you to experiment with some of these tools if you haven't already. So now let's talk about, and let me take a quick pause, John. Is there anything else that we want to sort of bring up before you get
No, but
distracted?
I want to leave time at the bottom for Brian's question and any others
Okay.
that come along.
All right, perfect. So the strategic pivot is beyond job search and specific AI tools to help you with job and career search. Where are things going? Where are things headed? And how should we or could we start to think about that as we think about our careers going forward? This is I forgot to put the reference on here, John, but this is from Rejig. It's an Australian company that is one of the leading companies of doing, they call these blueprints, workforce redesign blueprints. And what they do is they have a skills, they call it a skills ontology, where they are able to break down jobs into different tasks. And then for those tasks, they break them down into which would be good for AI and which would be good for humans. And so through that, they're looking at how we reinvent. You can see in this case, it's government. This is the government blueprint. They've got, I think, 24 of these for various industries, right? So we picked this one for government. And then they have some of the key job families that you see, in the dark blue on the left, the specific roles that are impacted by AI next to that in the next darkest blue. And then they start to talk about, okay, these are the roles that are being impacted. How are they? What are we think of these as adjacent jobs that are being used with AI that are becoming more in demand, right? So as a job, as we talked about before, some jobs go away, more jobs could increase, right? Some of your skills are going to shift. So how are your skills going to shift? And so these are a way of thinking about how the roles are shifting and the skills necessary are shifting. And then finally, all the way to the right, you see the reskilling pathways. And so these are specific things that all of us can do to start to learn these skills in order to be able to fulfill these in-demand transition roles. And you'll see that John asked me about this earlier. As far as the dates and the timing and so forth. These are sort of general estimates based off of not one particular program, but there are many programs that are out there. And so it's a sort of median of, generally there's multiple RPA certification programs, and you could achieve that in 4 to 6 weeks as an
So I'm
example.
going to go to Brian's question because that's on topic here. Brian writes, I'm taking AI courses. They are informative and useful. I'd like to find a place organization where I can learn practical skills. Consider a master's shop where apprentices go to learn. Great question. Not a school, but an immediate next step. And Matt, do you know of any of those? And if not, we can do a follow-up and post things on the landing page. But these certifications are partly the answer. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's partly the answer. But then I guess the question is, well, who do I go to for these AI
Yes.
tool training,
And to
right? I
his
mean, that's
point, like in an apprentice role, right?
yeah.
The practicum of it.
What I would say is I'm gonna do a shameful plug, but before I do my shameful plug, I'm going to talk about IBM. So IBM has done a lot of work in this, and what was it, the amount that they allocated recently? I can't recall, but it was substantial. And so if you go to IBM site, they've got a whole program around AI skills building. So and there's a number of these, right? I mean, you can look at like Coursera, offers a lot of courses for free. So Brian probably has already taken some of those courses. Um, there are a number of programs that offer free stuff where I think it's the differentiator, and it's interesting you talked about sort of a mentorship or what have you, is it's one thing to learn the technology, right? And you'll notice in this presentation we really haven't talked much about the technology. What I've found is that the technology, it's helpful when you lack the confidence to do the work, right? So you kind of feel like, oh, I'll get the baseline, so then I'll know what I can, I'll address my ignorance in the topic. But you don't really need to know the underlying technology for most of this. What's most important is to know what you can do with the technology and actually doing those things. And so what we would say is building your portfolio, which I think is a little bit what he's saying, is how do you start actually creating things with AI that you can see that you created and that you can refer to and that you can refer to in your resume and that you can show people that you've actually created those things. The IBM program, I was just looking at it, I believe IBM's program has some of that. And then what I'll show you is what we do, John, with the AI Commons, as you know, is that's
Yeah.
a big part of our focus, is to create we called it the AI Commons, which is an online workspace to bring these different LLMs together, to bring agents together, to bring prompts together, and to provide some guided, we call them adoption paths, so that people can actually learn AI by doing AI. And that's our philosophy, is that the best way to learn it is by doing it. And as an output of that, you start to build your portfolio. You have these AI assets that you've created. And so hopefully that helps to address
It
what
does. I
Brian's
think,
asking.
Matt, I'm going to put you on the hook
Yeah,
after this session, and I'll do it with the audience, so witnesses.
sure.
But it's a really great chat here. Brian, Tiffany, Abigail are having about this topic. So maybe we can do a follow-up as an email out to the attendees to this.
Fantastic.
Is that,
Yeah.
and as well, put some things on the site, on the
I'm
web.
just curious, like in that chat, are there some other things that do people want
No,
to
I think
address in this
again,
area or
questions.
other thoughts?
No, it's questions about AI courses, what schools are
Yeah,
offering them, but we haven't cracked the nut yet on Brian's initial question. It's all right. I mean, we just don't know the direct answer about these more informal uh, scenarios, right, of practical experience.
well,
Um,
what I would say is what we're doing in the AI Commons, and so part of the intention there is, we believe that what we've seen is that that the challenge and opportunity with AI is that it's not the big companies that are providing this; it's the users, right? So the
yeah,
use cases are people that come up with these ways of using AI. And so what we believe is that you bring common users together, right? So we have AI Commons for marketing professionals, for example, right? So
can we,
marketing professionals
Matt, let's do
presumably are
this.
going to have similar use cases to try AI and to learn from each other. So that's we believe is that a lot of the learning comes somewhat organically with some structure by bringing the right people together.
Yeah, so you're agreeing with Brian's point, and you're saying that your common solution addresses that, as does some other
It's
solutions.
intended to, right? And
Right.
I think IBM's, I don't know IBM's obviously as well as our own. I
Mhm,
think it kind of goes down that path, and I'm sure there are probably others as well.
mhm.
What I would just say is that I think that the way I differentiate it is there's taking a course, and I also come from an L&D background, right? So I'm kind of biased by that. But you can take a course and learn about something, but then you've got to transfer it back into the workplace or into practical applications. That's always been a challenge with training and development, learning and development, and so forth, right? And particularly if you're learning about technology of AI, right? Which at the end of the day, it's interesting and it probably is helpful, but how much is that really helping you to apply it? How much
Mhm.
is that really helping you to look at a workflow and where you put AI in that workflow, right? So that's what we believe that you can. One of the beautiful things about AI is that it's relatively intuitive to use, and with the right structure and bringing people together around the similar use cases and problems, that we help to do these together and learn from each other.
Great. You want to move forward? We're a little,
Yep.
we're down to about 12 minutes or so.
Yep. So I think we've talked about some of these, but so these are, we think about sort of longer term, beyond maybe your immediate job search, but if you're sort of thinking about future proofing your career, if you will, right? Then these are some of the key skills that we talk about AI fluency. And again, fluency is the ability to use AI to achieve outcomes that you care about, right? That these are some of the primary ones. And what I want to point out are a couple of things here. Again, now that we have these low code and no code platforms, like the foundational knowledge of machine learning, which you see at the bottom here, right, or familiarity with cloud platforms, doesn't mean you have to be an expert in these things. You don't need to be a programmer. You don't need to be an AI engineer. Now, there are plenty of jobs for that. And if you are, that's great, right? Because they can't hire those people fast enough, right? But what we're seeing is that the emerging field is applied AI in organizations. And what that means is that if you have a subject matter expertise, that you can take that subject matter expertise and use AI, and you're going to understand the workflows because of that, your background, your expertise. What you need to learn is AI, and then you put those two together, and that's how you're going to apply it. And by learning AI, again, we're not talking about programming. We're talking about the functionality of it, the capability of it, and you'll see some of the things we talk about here, AI ethics and governance as an example, right? So there are right ways and wrong ways to do AI. AI can hallucinate, right? Which is basically kind of comes up with answers. So there are things that are important to know and to understand, and where you have greater need for accuracy, or where you have greater tolerance for, like in a marketing brochure, whether it's 100% accurate, if I'm not citing data, probably doesn't matter to me so much, right? So there are ways to think about the technology. We just don't think you need to necessarily understand the technical components of the underlying the technology.
Great.
One thing I also want to point out, the critical reasoning and problem solving. So I think this is, to me, the most important thing, right? So we're all shifting to this world of whether we know it or not, we are, to a world of working more and more with AI and with technology. And so what that means is that I think we have to up our game a little bit around what do humans do that's particularly good, and it's particularly differentiated from the AI itself. And so that's why, and you've heard me talk about consulting, John. You've heard me talk about, basically, I believe that we all need to, the more that we can be critical thinkers, that we can identify problems that need to be solved, and that we can bring our expertise and experience to doing that, then the AI becomes a resource and a tool to help us to do that.
I want to make a point here too, Matt, tying this slide and the one back on government transition. I think I'm paraphrasing the chart. Yes, this slide.
Yep.
For folks in the audience, I think one big opportunity is to take your known skill set and experience today and then start to work with AI through an LLM and start to query what's the implication of your particular skill set vis-a-vis AI. So what are things that AI will start to be able to do for you so that when you go for the next job, if you want to bring your skill sets and experience along, you already know, and you can talk to it in an interview, how AI can perform these functions, and perhaps you've got your feet wet, you can actually demonstrate that a bit or talk to it. Thanks, Matt. You can go back to that.
Well, and just related to that, John, we have GPTs that we've created, and you can create it yourself as well, where they're designed to help you to, I think I would call one of them as an AI opportunity assessment. And so you can either put your job title in, you can put job description in, you can put your LinkedIn profile in, and then based on that, it will identify opportunities for you to be leveraging AI as an example, right? So again, I would highly encourage everyone. I mean, feel free to reach out, but AI itself is the great starting point for this.
Okay,
And
okay,
then let
great.
me so then these are some, and I'm going to try to hustle this up real quick, but these are some emerging possibilities, if you will, right? So I think we're starting to see some of these roles that are starting to come out to the marketplace. I don't have data on this, so I can't tell you, that there's X percentage of these or particular geographies, but these are the types of roles that we're starting to see more and more that are becoming available. And they're in three main categories. One's around trust. So as I mentioned, there is this concept of, you know, when we talk about responsible AI, and there's a whole sort of world of what responsible AI is, but a lot of it's around, is it trustworthy? Is it transparent? Right? Do you know where this information is coming from? Can you check the accuracy of the information? How is it trained? How are these models trained? And is it being used in an ethical way? So those are some of the highlights of that. Because it's such a fast moving field and there are all these questions, these trust-based roles are becoming more to the forefront. These auditors and ethicists and fact checkers and so forth. Then the integration-based roles, you're going to see, I think, is again this huge spike of how do we help look at these workflows and integrate our subject matter expertise with the AI. And then these taste-based roles, this gets more into sort of the integration of the creative with AI as well. So you'll see the creative directors, product designers, all sort of fit in that category. And then quickly, this is sort of an encouragement that you can sort of take hopefully some immediate steps from going forward. So one is, as we already talked about, just take your resume and run it through GPT or one of these applications. You can use JobScan as we've got here. John, you mentioned that's a little pricey, so we can also, refer them to a GPT if they can't find it. Practice an interview. You can also, by the way, we didn't spell this out here, but you can also use a GPT as a coach. And so, for many of us, coaching can be a little pricey, but you can create a GPT, or there are plenty of GPT coaches that are out there today that can help you they can be career coaches. There's therapist coaches, and you may laugh at these things, but they're really starting to show that they have significant benefits and application. And then certainly explore local resources. And I know that that Nova and there's plenty of resources already that are out there, which you're probably already aware of. And then finally, I'd say we already mentioned the CCI AI Commons, and I'll kind of end here. But this is a screenshot of our Commons. And basically, this is, again, an opportunity to come to a place and you can see on the left-hand side, you've got agents and prompts and plugins that are available as part of a library that you can pull from. You can see that there's a foldering system. And part of what we found is that because there's so many tools and resources available, that just getting organized around, what tool am I using? Am I storing this in different folders? How do I put this all in one place? Has a tremendous benefit. So the Commons allows us to do that. And then we have some of the structured programs. So we've got a program that we're launching tentatively. It could be August, but I think it's going to be September, October. It's an 8-week program. And it's intended to help people, you see the title, Empowered Through AI, right? So how do you learn AI by doing AI? And so if you're interested in that, and John, I think you and I talked about, there's a fee for it, but it's a pretty nominal fee, and we'll sort of give you, I think the 50% discount, which I think is becoming maybe the norm for this group. But again, it's a nominal fee, and we certainly would not charge something that no one can afford, because we believe it's so critical for folks. And now we have 5 minutes. So John, I ran 5 minutes over because you told me.
I think this is maybe the first time you've wrapped up before an hour, but let's not wrap up just yet. I think hearing this conversation and putting myself in the audience's shoes, what I take away is a tremendous amount of AI capability out there. When I first started working with AI, I didn't understand how extensive it was, how deep it can go. And I kept testing and creating prompts And the one thing about AI is it's never shy to give you an answer. Whether that answer is correct or not is up to you to decide. You have to own, your outputs, your results of that. It's really important for you. But I also think it's just a heck of a lot of fun when you're first starting out. I mean, it's enjoyable. I am not a programmer, so coding would have been a huge barrier for me. There is no coding or very minimal. I mean, there's no coding from my perspective, and I've gained a lot just by putting your toes in the water. So I encourage you to do that. Put your toes in the water. Matt, I don't think we have other questions. I'm seeing a great chat here. I don't know if Matt, you can see it
I can't, but
about
at least up here, I believe I
different
can.
AI tools and coaches, sort of AI coaching. So what we'll do is we'll put the presentation Matt went through onto the pivot landing page at novaeda.org. Two, Matt, maybe you and I could do a quick circle back and identify some other links that might be really interesting.
Yeah.
And then whatever you have coming up on CCI. So I think if there are no other questions, Matt's information, if you want to catch him, is one, it's on his LinkedIn.
I think it's
Two,
on the
he's
last
put his
slide as
email out
well.
there
Yeah, I put it, it's on my, you
for,
can contact me through LinkedIn. It's also on these slides that we'll make available as well.
okay.
And the other thing I would say is, I mean, I really appreciate feedback around, is this like useful for people on the call, or what would be more useful? I think that, John, that's what we always
Oh yeah,
want to
let's spend
know, like
1 minute. So if everybody can jump in and say, not everybody, but if you feel like it, was this useful? Yes, no, too bland, need more detail. One, you would like a follow-up session, has
yeah,
more
what would you
detail?
like more of that we didn't, that we could have covered that would be more
Yes.
beneficial to you?
And I'll stand here and look at Matt while you type.
But this is great. I mean, I really appreciate. The only thing I say is we prefer more of a dialogue, but obviously with the number of attendees, it's difficult to. And we cover a lot of ground with this, obviously, right? So it's a balancing act. But we do have we sometimes will do office hours. So with our training, with these programs, we integrate AI as tutors and as tools as part of it, right? So learn AI by doing AI. But believe it or not, people still like to talk to people. And so I, run office hours as part of these programs as well.
I'm going to propose to Nova EDA that Matt, that we maybe have a follow-up sort of working group opportunity. I think that could be interesting where folks can participate. We get them on screen and,
Yeah.
hi, I know of EDA. So I
Well, it
think,
looks like if you look at these responses, it sounds like that's what people are looking for, which doesn't
yeah,
surprise me, right? Which is like, let's roll up the sleeves and let's have, more of a dialogue around how you can use these in a practical way.
let me end. Thank you all for these inputs and these comments. Very, very valuable, much appreciated. Look forward toward the landing page for follow-up on the presentation. This Thursday is a doubleheader week, folks. So this Thursday, 2 days from now, we have the next session, how to own your story in a new industry. And we have 3 great panelists on that. So we'll go back to the panel format, and that'll be this Thursday, the 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Matt, thank you. And thanks to the audience for this great participation. And we will follow up on this dialogue. Thanks very much, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. Great day.
See ya.
Cheers.